So, let's start. I'll just ask you a few questions that I have listed, and then I'll get you to. I ask you some. You can talk about some of the things.
Okay.
But what is your full name?
Ethel Marie Robinson, Tipton.
And your date of birth?
April the 7th, 1901.
And the place of birth?
Bridgeport, PA.
Okay. I know that Mom and Dad already have information on your parents' names, I think. I don't know if they have where your parents are from. I think they just have their names and their dates. Do they have like where your mother was born and where your father was born? Do you know that?
Oh, well, my father evidently was born in Maryland, Baltimore, or Cambridge, probably Cambridge, Maryland.
Okay.
My mother, should I?
Yeah. Giving you a sign.
I don't know.
Well, your mom was, she was in the family that was the youngest of the 18?
Yes, she evidently was born in Valley Forge.
Right.
I would say Valley Forge.
Since they all lived around
Yes.
there.
Mm-hmm.
She must have. Okay. And I messed up this question. I have how old were you when you were born? I think I meant how old, do you know how old your parents were when you were born?
Oh, well, my mother was in her 40s. She's 40 years older than me, so she evidently was 41. I think she was 41 when I was born.
And then your dad was probably a couple years older than
I think they were the same age.
Same age.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. I have here, I wanted to know, what was what were their occupations? I guess your mother wasn't working and your father?
No, my mother was a housewife.
Right.
My father was what would I call him? He was an upholster and a cabinet maker. He made furniture and things like that. I would say he was a cabinet maker and furniture.
Right.
Yeah.
That's right.
I would say he was a cabinet maker.
And you had, how about your brothers and sisters? You had?
I had two brothers and a sister.
And you were the youngest?
I was the youngest. Mm-hmm.
All right. Is there anything that, I wanted to know a little bit about your parents. I wonder if there's anything that that sticks in your mind. I'm sure there's a lot of things that stick in your mind about your parents.
Well, as I can't remember my father too much because I was only about 6 when he died. So I probably was between 6 and 7 when he died. But I remember my mother, of course, all her life, because I lived with her. I lived with her until she died.
She was how old when she died?
89. And I was with her all those years, so I knew a lot about her. And she was a very gentle, self-giving person. You know, she gave her all to her kids. Never married again, even though she was still in her 40s. See, she was only 49, I think, when she was widowed. 48 or 49.
And that was the story about was it the storm or the boat when your father died?
No, he was out fishing. He was out fishing alone. He had gone down to visit his relatives, which lived in Cambridge, Maryland. He went down there. His mother still lived, and he went down with her. And he went out fishing. He was quite a fisherman, and he went out fishing, and he didn't come back. And I don't know whether he fell overboard or what, but he drowned. And they didn't find his body for about 5 or 6 days. So
Right.
what happened, no one ever knew.
Right. Right.
Whether he, I don't know, whether he was sick or whether we don't know. We never knew. My mother never knew. She just got the word that he had been drowned, and she went down to the funeral by herself. And of course she didn't see him because, he was so deep.
Right.
So bad they had no viewing or anything. So that was, and he was only, well, as I say, 48 or 49.
Huh. And then, so was everybody upset then? I mean, your family were they all living together at that time? Was Aunt Emma and
Well, and
Eddie?
Eddie,
Or were they all living? Are they living on their own by then?
Eddie, I think that Eddie might have been living, no wait, Emma was up at Valley Forge. We had this, my mother had this sister that lived up there on a big farm, and they had Otley every year, every summer they had Otley.
Like when he had summer vacation from school?
Yeah, from summer school. They had him, he went up there to help them, and every year when he was old enough to help them. And that year, my sister was up there too, because she was up there when they got the news about my father. And Eddie probably was working. I think he worked at a farm, and I think maybe he was working someplace, because Eddie was 10 years older than me, so he would have been
He was the oldest?
Yes, he would have been in his late teens. See, if I was 7, he
Right.
would have been at least 17, and he would have been on his own.
Right. Right.
So I don't think he was living home.
And you were really the only person
Yeah.
at home during the summer?
Just during that summer, yes, because I know they were not with us when we got the word, because Emma come down from Valley Forge.
Right, right. Well, let's see. We got information on your brothers and sisters. Is there any? I guess I only really knew Aunt Emma. I guess Uncle Otley was around
Oh yes.
for a while when I was little. Is there? I didn't have. There's some things you'd like to.
Well, he lived to he died in. Let me say, he died before Doug was born. Just before Doug was born. Doug was on the way when Otley died.
So Doug was born in.
56.
Right.
So Otley died in 56.
56.
Mm-hmm.
And Eddie died a long time ago? I mean, he was never, never knew him, right?
No, he died after Otley.
Really?
Oh yes, Otley died before he did.
Where did he live?
He lived in Florida when he died.
Did I ever see him when I was little?
You probably did. Yes, you probably did. Now wait, they lived in. They had bought a little home when he retired up on 113. He was a man very fond of animals. They always had dogs. They had little French poodles at that time. But he retired, and they sold their home and went to Florida. But he didn't.
He and his wife?
He and his wife, his second wife. His first wife died, and then he married again. And they didn't live in Florida too long before he died, but he was, let me see, I don't know how old he would have been when he died. Otley died in 57, or 56.
Right.
And he was, well, he died after Emma did.
Yeah.
He died after Emma.
Ed did?
Oh yes, oh yes. He was still living when Emma and when Emma lived.
I didn't know that. I mean, I remember when Aunt Emma died.
Yeah.
I remember
Well,
that.
he was still living
So
when Emma
lovely.
died. Yeah. Because oh yes, because his wife's name was Blanche.
Well, I
Sugar.
remember those names. I just didn't know that was
Yeah,
your brother.
Blanche and Eddie. Yeah,
Huh. I didn't,
yeah,
I didn't know that because I guess I didn't hear that much about him
yeah.
since he wasn't around.
No.
Well, why don't we talk about when you went to school and that that age, I guess. Because you lived in Bridgeport when you were first born,
But
and then
I didn't live there long before we evidently moved back to Norristown because that photo shows me in Norristown. That picture is in Norristown, that I know. And I was probably only about 6 months old in that picture. So I don't know how long we lived there. And then my father worked there. He worked for the Kugel shops. That was the undertaker. He used to line their coffins, do that kind of work.
do carpentry. He didn't
And
build the coffins.
No,
He
but
just would do the
he
interior.
did the upholstering. He was an upholsterer. That's
Upholsterer.
what I'm trying to think. He was an upholsterer and also a cabinet maker. Yeah. And but then he wanted to go in business for himself, which he took a place in Norristown, and I remember that place. It was right on the corner of Main and Pearl, I think, Main and Pearl Street, and and there he had a little shop where he worked, and business went on for a while, I guess, and then things started to go bad.
Once he was working for himself.
Yeah.
I can see that happen to Bob's father too.
Yeah. Well, his problem was drinking.
Well, that was Bob's father's
Yeah.
problem too.
See, for all that time he lived in Cone Street, he was on the wagon, and everything was good. I mean, they had a good life. I can see a lot of stuff that I'm telling you, Diane.
You heard.
I've heard from my
Anna
mother.
or-
I can't remember it as a child myself. I have to tell it as a hearsay.
Right.
That I'm getting it from what my mother told me or what Emma told me. And Emma was 8 years older than me,
Right.
and she could know a lot and tell me a lot.
Right.
So when she used to do his bookkeeping, she was old enough then that she could help him with his bookkeeping.
With his own business.
When they had this little shop in Norristown, and he was doing all right. But this day, I can remember her telling me about it. This day he went to Philadelphia on business, and when he came back, she was working at his books, and he leaned over to talk to her, and she smelled his breath, and she
Right.
knew, and it just made her sick. And from that time on, he was nothing. He had to give up the business. We had to give up that home. And then we went back to another place in Norristown where things went from bad to worse.
Right.
And I don't think he ever worked after that. I don't know how we got along. I really don't. It couldn't have been very long. The time seems long to me, but it couldn't have been very long because it wasn't too awful long after that before he died.
Well, your mother knew what was going on at this point.
Oh, yeah.
Because I remember you telling a story when she first found out
Yeah,
that he was drinking.
yeah.
That was way before you were born that she
Oh,
found
yeah,
out?
that was when her father was still living, and she found this little bottle in the desk or someplace, and
After she was just married or something?
yeah, and she took it to her father, and she asked him what it was, and he said, well, that's what makes that little man of yours so happy sometimes. And she didn't even know. She was such an innocent person. She didn't
Right.
even know what it was.
But he didn't have a lot. Did he have a lot of problems with it before you were born? Do you think, or it probably just got worse when he tried to start his own?
I think,
Or he realized maybe that he knew he might have problems. And
yeah,
that's why he stopped.
he evidently had the problems before I was born, because from what she told me, that he went on the wagon and stayed on it for all those years. That
Right.
was hard for us to understand how he could do that. He came home to her and said to her, Ellie, I went on the wagon. And she said, oh, you've said that so many times. And he said, well, this time I mean it. And he did. But then someone evidently in Philadelphia invited him
Right.
to take a drink. And he did. And that's what started it again. And he couldn't help it. It was a disease with him. That's what it was. And he was a smart little fellow. He was a little fellow, and he was smart. He had a good education. He came from a good family. And we would have had such a better life if that hadn't happened.
Right.
And when he went to Baltimore or Cambridge, he went up to. He told my mother. He said, "I'm going away to try to find myself." He said, "My family is ashamed of me." He said, "They're all ashamed of me, but little Ethel." And she's too little to know what it's all about. And he said, "But I'm going away to see if I can't find myself and better myself." So he went down to his mother, and then that's what happens. So it leaves a doubt in our mind
Right.
what happened. So it's a story.
Yes. People are still trying to find themselves.
Yes, yeah, that's right.
I didn't even know they used that word, those
Yeah.
words back then.
Yeah.
I guess
Well,
that's-
he even went up to see Emma at Valley Forge.
she was married at the time then?
No,
that's right,
she was
still-
living, she was a young girl, and she was living with my aunt, where I finally lived. And he went up to see her and Otley, and to say goodbye to them and tell them that he was going down to Cambridge.
Right.
And that was the last they saw of him.
Right.
So, but I don't remember him too much, Diane, because I was too little, I guess, to
Right.
remember too much about it.
Probably had an impact on you, but you don't really.
Yeah,
You don't remember.
I don't remember.
Then at that point, you were. Then soon after that is when you all moved to Valley Forge.
Then it wasn't too long. As far as I can remember, it was in the spring. I am going up to the grave of this aunt of mine and just find out when she died, the year that she died, because that,
Your mother's sister.
yes, that will tell me when we moved up there, because when she died, this left these two men alone, and this other sister of my mother, Aunt Phoebe, she went to these two men and she said to them, "You have to have a housekeeper. You can't live here by yourselves." She said, "Why don't you ask Aunt Ellie to come and keep house for you?" She said, "Otley's already here," because Otley was living there then. She says, "You already have Otley here, and it would make a home for her and Ethel, and it would give you a housekeeper." So they did. They came and asked Mama to come up and take care of them,
Right.
which she did. We put all of our furniture in storage and moved up there. And I'm not sure just when, but if I would see the date of her death, because I know we moved right after she died.
Right. Was Aunt Phoebe? Mom said there was some aunt that lived in a hill. Is Aunt Phoebe the aunt that lives in a hill?
Yes, that was Aunt. Wait, I have to get them straight. This was Aunt Liddy that died. That we took
That was
her.
Benny and
That we,
Eddie's mother.
yes, that we took her place. But then there was Aunt Lizzie that lived over in the little house. That lived in a little house like this that we used to go to visit. Yeah, that was Aunt Lizzie.
And that was the house on the hill, or
Yeah.
in the hill.
Yeah,
Right.
just like this. It was
Right.
one little room on top of another one. Yeah, I think her name was Aunt Lizzie. Wasn't it? Wait a minute. Aunt Lizzie, Aunt Phoebe, Aunt Lizzie.
Aunt Phoebe is the one I used to hear you talk about the most.
Aunt Phoebe. Well, she always lived in Norristown.
She,
She lived in Norristown.
she's not the one that now. No, she's not the one that died of pneumonia. You used to tell
Yeah,
me.
she died of pneumonia, and so did Aunt Lizzie. Aunt Lizzie died of pneumonia too.
Well, one of them died because she went to a dance and didn't dress
Oh
warmly.
no, that was Aunt. That was my mother's sister, a younger sister, Catherine.
Margaret, maybe.
Isn't that awful? There was
What was it? Tell me the story so I can.
there was Mama and Emma. There were the three girls three girls that grew up of the second birth. You know.
Three grew old, you mean?
Yeah, of the.
Second
See,
age.
there were 9 children of that second marriage, but there were just 3. There were only 4 that grew up out of the 9. The rest of them all died when they were children, but there were 4 of them grew up. Mama, which was Ellie, and Aunt Emmy, and
Phoebe.
huh? No.
That wasn't.
No, she was in the other one. I know, it's funny, I can't think of her name.
That's all right. Tell me the story about the one that died when she went to the dance.
Well, she was such a beautiful girl in the first place. And she was going to this dance at that time. And she only wore a little bit of a shawl. It was in the winter time, and she only wore a little shawl over her dress. She wasn't dressed warm enough, and she caught cold, and she died.
And she died.
And she was engaged. I can remember my mother telling about it, how she was engaged, and how the man that she was engaged to, he took it so hard. He just wept over her coffin. He didn't want to give her up. She was such a beautiful girl.
Right.
And isn't that awful? I can't think of her name.
You've told me her name before too, and I can't remember it. I know you've told me, but I can't remember what her name was.
I can get it for you.
That's all right. That's
I
all right.
have
We
it
can get it after.
I have it in
your book.
the Bible. See, I have all the names in the Bible. I can get it for
Yeah,
you.
no, we can get it. So, well, now you're up in Valley Forge. So you were in Valley Forge in your.
Well, I would say
Until you finished school, were you at Valley Forge?
no.
No, you went back to someplace else to school then?
Oh yes, I stayed there. I guess we lived there 4 or 5 years, up in Valley Forge, and then the boys, Eddie, was so tired of farming he wanted to sell the place, see, and so he worked on Benny. Benny didn't want to give it up because he loved the farm, but he gave in to Eddie, and they sold it. Sold a 100-acre farm for $12,000. Can you imagine? A beautiful home of center hall, stone home, and all these buildings.
The house is still there, isn't it?
Oh yes. Hmm. And
What grade were you in when you had to leave?
well, when I came down, that's one thing I can't remember. But I went to Lincoln School, that's in Norristown, and I went and they made me take a test because coming from a country school to a town school, they put me back a half a grade. At that time, they used to promote you twice a year. You know what I mean? They didn't the full year. They would in the fall and in the spring and in the middle of the term.
I mean, they move you.
And they would move you up from.
You'd be in first grade for half a year and second grade the second half. What do they call it? First grade, second grade, or not?
Yes, they used to call first grade and second grade, third grade, fourth grade, fifth grade, sixth grade, and eighth grade. Those went to the Lincoln School.
Mm-hmm.
Then you went from there to high school.
Right.
There was no middle school. There was no.
But when you say they promoted you in the middle of the year, in 1 year would you go through 2 grades?
No, I don't think so. No. Anyhow, they put me back. But then I started to do pretty good, and then they said I could go on ahead, but I didn't want to because I was with
friends then?
I was with friends. I was with Helen and Hattie and Florence, and I didn't want to leave them and go on. And I said, well, if it didn't make any difference, I'd rather stay where I was. And it didn't make any difference. So I stayed where I was until then I went to high school. And I graduated from that school. We had a graduation.
Oh, so you graduated from high school?
No.
No, you graduated from
the grammar school. We called it grammar school.
The 8th grade.
Yes, I graduated from grammar school.
By that time you were back in Norristown again?
Oh, yes. I was in Norristown then probably 2 years, probably. I would say 2 years.
Probably when you were around 3rd, 4th, 5th grade, those years, that's probably when you were in
I probably came down from there maybe about when I was 14, maybe, 13, 14. And then I went to this grammar school, as I say. I finished there, then I went to high school for 2 years.
So what age were you when you finally finished school, do you remember?
16.
You were 16 when you got it? Let's talk about Valley Forge for a little while. Then we'll jump up to when you were 16, I guess. That's where most of the stories that you've told me have been Valley Forge stories.
Yeah.
So, but since I've never put them on tape, I just have to trust them to memory. So, why don't you tell me about? I always like the Indian story.
The what?
The Indian, the uncle or someone that went out to live with the Indians.
Oh.
What was that story?
Well, now that was Uncle Cad, and that was these two men's father, Benny and Eddie's father. And his name was Cadbury, but they called him Cad. And he was a real rough man, he was. And she was, his wife, and Liddy, was the most gentle little thing, and tiny little thing. All those firstborn of my grandfather were little people. They were small. And she was a tiny little thing, and how she would ever pick one with him, I don't know, but she did. And he was a rough man. And, well, you've heard the story about the church.
Oh, that's one I want you to tell me again.
You want me to tell that? Well, he was not a church-going man. And this time they had a meadow in back of their barn, I remembered, and it had a little stream that went through it. All meadows have a stream go through it, and he had horses out there, in this meadow. And this is the story as I get it. see, and the way my mother told it. And there was evidently a little church across the road, because there still, today, is a little graveyard there, all stoned in. Many times I went to it. And this little church was there, and they had had a meeting. And evidently, I guess whether we're Methodist or what, I don't know, but they got pretty happy, and they went down the road singing and making a lot of noise. And it frightened the horse. And he jumped across the stream and broke his leg. And he had the shooting. And a couple of days after that, the little church was burned down.
And they never found out who did it?
No.
Now, if
But they always thought that he did it, you know. And you can imagine that he did.
Right. Well, they used to tell a story that he went out to live with the Indians or something. That was before he got married, or?
No, I think he was married. I think he left and went, and he was living with the Indians. Not only that, now I'm not sure about that, about him living with the Indians, but I know during the war they said that he paid someone to go in his place in the war.
What was that?
Well, that would be
The Civil War?
Couldn't have been the Civil War. My mother was born in 60. He would have been older.
Maybe there was a French-Indian War?
I guess maybe it was.
I don't remember my history.
Or maybe
I don't
it
remember
was,
what was
maybe
happening.
it was your grandfather would know.
Right.
But anyhow, they say he paid someone to go in his place. But that's the type of man he was. And they said that he swore so, but anyhow, he had a stroke, and for a long time he never spoke a word. He was paralyzed and never was able to talk. And I think from this,
God got him.
I think from the story that I've found, they found him. I think they found him out in the little outside toilet, dead. So that was him. Now this one man, Benny, he would take after his mother because he was gentle like her, where Eddie probably was, although Eddie wasn't like the father, he wasn't as bad as the father, but he was more or less cruel. Many a time I saw him beating the horses over the head with a club, and you know, I couldn't take that.
No, just to get them to do something he wanted them to do.
Mm-hmm.
Now, you said that they shared a room together. Neither of them, well, obviously none of them ever got married.
No, as I said, I don't think Benny ever had a girl. I don't think Benny ever bothered with girls, but Eddie did. Eddie was engaged to a girl, and she evidently found out what kind he was and threw him up and got married to somebody else. And that made him bitter, and he was always bitter after that.
So when they sold the farm, did they split up, or did the two stay together?
No, they stayed together. They had now this has gone back a little bit. You see, Cad's father, that would be Cad's father.
Their grandfather.
Yes, their grandfather. He evidently owned all that ground. And there was, I don't know how much ground, because at one time he had Cad and Ben and Lydy and another daughter. I don't remember her name. But then Cad got the home that I lived in.
Right.
And Ben lived with him. That was his brother.
Right.
And he was just as gentle as
the other.
as his nephew was.
Right.
But then the father gave about 30 acres to the two sisters. They were spinsters. They never got married, Aunt Lydia and this other one. And that was connected to this other farm. Many a time I walked over to their place. But that was 30 acres.
Right.
And they built a home on it, a lovely home, brick home. And there's where those two sisters lived.
Mm-hmm. They shared the house.
Those two sisters shared the home. Now, by the time I went up there to live, the one sister had died, but Aunt Lydia was still living.
Right.
And many a time I went over there. Now, she had a piece of ground, and when the boys sold their farm, they built a little house on a piece of her ground. You know what I mean? Right down below her, they built this little home and lived in it until they died.
So they never had to work again.
They never worked again.
They used their money that they made. And
yeah. Benny, I think, worked a little bit on the golf course for somebody. And he traveled all the way out to California and different things. Eddie didn't do anything. He just stayed home. And he, as I said, he died in his 60s.
Do you remember, do you know what the street is called now, the road, or what it was called then that this property was on? I know we've driven by it, but I don't know what it's called. I don't know if I could even find it again.
No, well, if you would go through Valley Forge, you would just keep on going. Now, when you come up through the village of Valley Forge, you come to a certain place where the post office is, and there's a church on one side. Well, there's sort of a fork. The road goes this way, and this road goes that way. This road goes past the big place where Eisenhower had, you know what I mean.
Freedom's Foundation?
Yes.
Freedom's Foundation?
Yes, this road goes there. This road, if you take this road.
The left?
Yes. And keep on going, then that would go past the steward's place. And that brings you right up to, that keeps you on going up to Phoenixville. That's the way we used to go. See, we used to have a trolley that went past our place.
So that would be the road.
Yeah, that would be.
Once you get into the village.
You would go to this fork, and it's up above the post office and up above the little church. There's a little church there on the right. Your mother sang there one time. But at this fork, this fork goes to the foundation, and this fork goes up past where I'm talking about.
Okay. So, is there anything else we should talk about when you lived at Valley Forge?
Oh, well, there's lots of things I could say. I could keep on talking forever about the things that happened there. I don't know whether they're any interest to you or not. I don't know.
Well, mention the ones that are most interesting, a couple, and then we can go on to when you were older, when you went out.
Well, you want to know more about the farm? You want to know more about the farm, or?
Well, things that you were involved with, or things that you did when you were up there.
Well, of course.
Did you work on the farm, or you mostly played?
Well, my job was taking care of the chickens. I did always fed the chickens. I always gathered the eggs, because one time I remember falling and breaking a lot of them. I was scared to death. They had a bucket that they had made, and they had lined it with carpet to gather the eggs in, because they had a lot of chickens, And I had that, and of course I had my pets. We had a dog, but I could never make much of it. It was an old dog, and it was Benny's dog, and it was a little terrier. But I had a pet chicken, and I had a pet pigeon, and I had a little pet little gosling. Someone gave me a couple eggs, and I put them under a hen, and I got one little gosling out of it. Yeah, and that little that little thing followed me every place I went. I guess it thought I was its mother, and it followed me every place. But I don't know whether I babied it too much. Anyhow, I lost it. It died, and I had a little chicken that was something wrong with it. It didn't walk quite right. It would fall all over. And didn't have many feathers on it. It was just a pathetic little thing, and I sort of pitied it and I babied it, and the same way with a pigeon, but they died too. So they were one thing. Well, I can tell you about the bull, if you're interested in the bull. They had bulls. When I went there, they had this big one with a big ring in his nose.
Because it was a dairy. They were doing dairy.
Oh, they had lots of cows.
For milk.
Oh yes.
Okay,
yeah,
not for steers. Not
no,
to kill for meat.
But they always
milk.
had a bull.
Right.
And they had this big bull with a big ring in his nose. And I said to Benny, and Benny was always joking with me, and I said, Benny, why does that bull have a ring in his nose? He said, well, every time he shoves someone over a fence, he gets a ring in his nose. Well, anyhow, they got rid of him, and then they raised one. But I was so afraid of that bull, and to go to the chicken yard, I had to go in the cow yard. I had to go through a fence and over like this, and into another gate into the chicken yard. And if that bull was anywhere in there, I would not go in there. And that bull knew it, you know. He knew that I was afraid. And if he would be down here, they used to go way down there to the watering hole, well, then I'd scoop in there. But believe it or not, if that bull would see me in that chicken yard, he would wait out there, and he would stand there and paw like this. Have you seen them do that?
Yes.
And
Like
then I would be so afraid that I would run all the way down to the road and come up so I wouldn't have to go through that barnyard.
Right.
Well, they finally got rid of that bull. Then they raised one from a baby. And it wasn't very long before he was just as mean as that one was.
Right.
And one time he had me up a tree. I just forget a little bit about this, but anyhow, I know I had to climb up this tree to get away from him, and he stood underneath me. And I was so afraid of that bull, but that was it. That's the story of the bulls. I was just scared to death of them, and I think they knew it.
Yeah, I think they can tell too.
Yeah, I wasn't a bit afraid of the cows.
What type were they?
The black and white. They're the
Holsteins?
they're the Holstein. Holstein. Yeah, they were black and white, and they were nice, and they were kept nice. And Eddie Otley worked with them. He was quite a little worker. He really was good.
He was the milker?
Yeah. Oh yeah. And he used to, if I'd come down, he'd squirt me. He always did that. But one year, the two men went away. I think they went away on business. They went away together. Anyhow, for a couple of days, Otley was home alone. And he had that bull to take care of. The second bull, not the first one, the second bull. And that darn thing, he had the worst time trying to get it into the barn. But he made up his mind he was going to conquer that bull, and he did with a pitchfork. He finally got him in. But I was scared to death of him.
Didn't you tell me you had a rooster that you didn't like either? I thought you told me, or maybe someone told me that story, that the rooster that if you would turn your back on.
Well, that was over here.
Oh, that was here?
Yeah, that was here, I guess. No,
Oh,
I
so that
don't.
wasn't when you
No,
had friendly roosters when you were small.
no, not. No, I don't think. Well, they must have had roosters. They had roosters because they had little peeps. You know,
Right.
we had the little. They had the little houses
Right,
where they
so they
would
must have.
take the. So I knew they
They probably
had.
had them separate.
Yeah, they had the little roosters. I can tell you a story about the little house. I used to always. Well, this day, the mother hen was in there with her little peeps, and I would have to put my hand in to get the dish out, you know.
Right.
And I guess, as far as I can remember, she couldn't have been in there, nor the peeps either. But I put my hand in to get the dish out to put the feed in, and there was a big snake in the little house,
Yeah.
you know. Well, that scared me, of course, and I called Otley. I said, "Oh, Otley, come quick! There's a snake in one of the chickens' coops. We call them
Right.
coops." He came and shot it, got rid of it. So that was
Oh, he was a
another.
great big brother.
Yeah. Oh, he was. We got along great. I was really very fond of him.
Because you were the closest in age to him, right?
There were two. Let me see there.
And then Aunt Emma and Eddie were close.
It was 2 years between Eddie and Emma, 4 years Otley,
Right.
and 4 years between Otley and me.
All right, so you were
Yeah.
closest.
Yeah, but I was closer to him, and then living up there those 4 years with him, maybe not much closer to
Was
me.
I was going to ask you, did you have playmates when you lived in that area, or because you were in
No.
the country, it was mostly you
No.
played, you
I-
entertained yourself?
The only playmates I had was at school.